name's Julia Twynholm and I'm a psychologist at Birmingham Children's Hospital. And I'm hopefully over the next half an hour going to give you a bit of an insight into some of the work that I do working with families within a paediatric context. So I've worked in paediatrics probably for around the last 8 years, and half of that really has been sort of working with OI families. And I've been asked today really to come and think about some of the psychological issues and mental health that comes up within a physical health condition. And my aim really is to use my experience of working with families to talk to you about some of the common themes that I often see when working together, and some of the things that we think about and how we work together to try and create a shift so that young people and their families can live as optimum a life as they want to live, with OI being there as a factor but not being the dominant factor in the choices that they make. So my aim is really to think about some of the psychological reasons that OI can have a significant impact on development. To think about how we help the individual, the I, to be the prominent focus and take the lead, and also how we can think about people's values as a way of supporting them to engage with things that matter to them and are important. So if we look at the general research around chronic illness, there's a number of different areas that we know can be affected by having a chronic condition like OI or other conditions as well. So obviously there's a very physical aspect often to having a physical health condition, hence the title. And that can place real limitations on people's lives in terms of what they're able to do, things that they can access locally, and also people's perceptions as well within that limitation access. And that's a really important aspect that hopefully we'll touch on throughout this talk, really, is that sometimes there are very real aspects to having a physical health condition, but also some of it can be about people's perceptions and their expectations around somebody. And sometimes those things don't really fit together, and we need to work with them to try and make a shift. The other area is around education. Obviously it's a really important area for young people that they're in education, not only for the academic side, but also for the social side. So if children are coming to hospital appointments or they're experiencing fractures, that's obviously going to impact on the amount of time that they're in school and then potentially the future options. Lifestyle and social relationships is also an area that's really important to think about. Not only in terms of people's opportunities, so whether they feel as able to engage in the same things as other people their age, but also in terms of their activities and their interests. So one thing that I often notice is that as children go into secondary school, there's a real drive towards sports. And that can be quite hard for some young people who feel that they can't maybe engage in the same way as other people their age in those. But are there ways that we can help them to engage, that they can feel involved, that maybe there's alterations that can be made so that they're still able to engage and take part and feel part of the group that they're with. And then that fourth area, which is really shaped by those other three factors, is about people's self-esteem and their emotional life. So it's about their confidence in themselves. And we know that if we're able to engage in things that are important to us, we're able to feel like we fit in with other people, and we're able to be able to see aspirations and things that we can achieve, then that helps our self-esteem and helps us feel confident about ourselves and who we are. So if we take it now a bit more focused in terms of OI, these are some of the things that I often see with the families that I meet through clinic and then go on to see in individual sessions. So the first area that I've put there is anxiety. I think there's a lot of understandable anxiety around a condition like OI, where you know the potential risk factors that could impact on that young person and their family. And that anxiety is often linked to the caring side, so the thing you can see in the lower quadrant. Because people's desire to care and to nurture and to look after their young person can often mean that they can become a bit more overly anxious, desire to protect, to keep people safe. Now, the anxiety can come from parents, but it can also come from the child themselves, and that they feel worried about the things that they're able to do and maybe don't access things in the same way. But also then we've got the impact of other people in terms of your community, your healthcare system, your school as well, which are always giving messages to young people. And anxiety is something that we know is contagious really. And if somebody hears something that makes them feel worried, that often then has a trickle effect into other people and to other situations. Limitations is another area that young people and families talk to me about. Now this can be for themselves really, that they feel they're not able to do the same things. But a big area that comes up really is about sort of those normal everyday experiences. So the clubs that they might go to in school, going to birthday parties, and also then thinking about the future. And if young people feel that they aren't able to access those things in the same way, they often feel like they're missing out, which can lead into feelings of difference, really. And that's something that tends to heighten from sort of 7, 8 years onward in terms of the individual becoming more aware of those differences, becoming more independent. And so if they feel that they're missing out at that time and they're becoming more socially aware, that can have a real impact for them. And like I said, the sort of the caring and the nurture side. Obviously, we want to look after our families and our young people. We want to keep them safe. But sometimes maybe some of the barriers that we put in place to try and keep them safe can actually hinder some of their development. So what I mean by that is, maybe there's a party coming up and a parent makes a choice of, actually, no, there's going to be things like a bouncy castle or a trampoline at that party. I'm not going to let my child go to it because it's not safe for them and they're not going to be able to do those sorts of activities. But perhaps then there are ways that they could be there. They might not be able to do all of those activities, but they could share in the experience of it. And then on the Monday morning when they go back into school, they can talk to their friends and their classmates about what the party was like, what was the food that they ate, what did they do, what did they enjoy, and sharing that experience. And that's really important in terms of helping people feel like they're part of things and like they're having the same life as other people around them. So in terms of thinking about families, there's a number of areas that often come up that people highlight. And the big one is around exclusion. So feeling that they're not involved in things in the same way and that they don't have the opportunity to do those everyday things that maybe other children their age do. So what can be really helpful with this is thinking with children about what they might say. Thinking with them about, okay, if somebody comes up to you and asks you, okay, why are you in a wheelchair, or why do you look a little bit different? They have an explanation, they have something to say to that situation. Because we know ourselves that if we get asked a question and we don't really feel prepared for it, that makes us feel much more anxious than maybe if we've had a bit of a think about, okay, what do I want to say? What do I want people to know about me? And what's enough information? So practicing and sort of giving it a bit of a go and a bit of a role play can be a really helpful way of preparing young people from that. And that can start from a very young age, 3, 4 sort of onwards, when children are starting to think about the vocab that they might use to talk about the way that they appear maybe, or their condition. And having that brief explanation of saying, yeah, I've got a Y, and that means that maybe my bones aren't quite as strong as yours. Oh, by the way, did you see the Arsenal match last night? And that's the thing, we want it to be in a context of normal life. Yeah, we want young people to be able to see that they can talk about their condition, it's part of them, but it isn't all of them. There are lots of other things that make them the person that they are. So saying yes to social invites is also really important. It's like I touched on before with the idea of birthdays. Sometimes we make decisions that are about our worry, and our worry sort of makes the choices for us, really, because we think about things maybe that have happened before, or we think about things that might happen in the future, and we find it quite difficult to sort of stay in the moment here and now and really respond to the information we have in front of us. So that means we don't always make really the optimum decision. We make the decision that sort of maybe feels the most comfortable for us, or maybe reduces our anxiety in the quickest way. Another way you can think about things is actually, if your child doesn't want to go out to new environments, is bringing people to you and getting them involved, bringing them into your home, showing them that your home is just like theirs, and that maybe there's a few things that look a bit differently, but actually you do the same sorts of things, you have the same sorts of conversations as a family, you live a very similar life that they do. And another aspect as well that's really important that I think some parents, when I first talk about this, feel a little bit shocked, is the idea of taking risks. Children are programmed to take risks because that's how we learn. That sort of comes through our evolution, that we have to take risks as young children so that we can then go on and progress as adults. Because if we never have those opportunities as a young child to take risks, when suddenly we're placed in situations as teenagers or young adults, we don't have that experience, we don't have that knowledge, we haven't tried to do things before. So that actually places us in a much more risky context than if we'd maybe taken those risks earlier on when we were young children and starting to develop. Obviously, school is a really important area for children and young people, and it's really important to have a good relationship with school. And not all schools are that easy to have a good relationship with, so that can be quite variable. But actually having an open conversation about what you want, what you expect to happen if a child has a fracture, how soon you want them to return to school and how you want that to be done, but also about situations where maybe they can't get back into school straight away. What's practically reasonable, yeah? What things can the school send home to keep them engaged and keep them still learning? But also, how do you support them staying in contact with their friends? So again, they're not missing out from those experiences, they're still feeling part of things, which should then hopefully make getting back into school later a much easier process. So if you can organise and initiate those visits, with friends or using social media, depending on their age, that can then hopefully make that transition back to a much smoother process. Siblings. Obviously, we've got to think about the whole family. And siblings are a group that can often feel a little bit left out of things, really. And they have a lot of different experiences that come up. They can be very upset, they can be angry, they can be scared, because maybe they don't quite understand what this OI thing is that's in their family, or how they might get it or not, and what that means. And so giving siblings a forum to talk openly about how they feel is really important. And that can be a hard thing to do, because it can be hard to hear your child say those things to you, to admit that actually they're quite angry or they're quite frustrated, but it's actually really important that they have that voice, that they have that say. And a good way sometimes is for siblings to be able to come along sometimes, to events like this or to go into health appointments, so that they understand a bit more about what's involved and what's going to happen and how they might be a part of that. And that's not something that we'd want to happen all the time, but maybe just having that bit of an insight will help them understand more about what the experience is like for their sibling and maybe have a bit of better appreciation of that. And then the last thing that I think families have found really helpful is trying to have a bit of special time with those siblings who aren't affected. Now obviously that can be quite a challenge. You've got multiple demands on your time in terms of your needs, in terms of work and other aspects, and also your child who has OI perhaps has multiple appointments at the hospital or physio or OT. But we know that children need attention, they demand attention. And if they're not getting it in positive ways, they'll find other ways to do it. And that's often when we might see siblings maybe struggling at school or having other difficulties, because actually they're not getting the attention that they need really. So if we can provide a forum for them to get that, in a very normative way, that might be that there's a certain programme that you always watch together, or perhaps they're always with you when you go on a supermarket run and you have a drink in the cafe at the end. Just something that gives them that little bit of a space, the opportunity to talk about things that are coming up for them, but also for them to know and realise that they're still loved as they always were, and that their attention, and that is important to you as a family. And I'm thinking about parents. I think parents often get a little bit missed almost in all of this, because your focus can often be so strongly on your child and making sure that your child's okay and they get everything that they need, that actually your needs get sort of pushed to the back. But your needs are just as important, because those are the things that are going to help you continue to cope with this lifelong condition that's in your family. So it is being there for your child, but also acknowledging that you've got your own reactions and that they might be quite different to your child's. And also that those reactions may ebb and flow over the years. So at times things might feel quite stable and quite calm, but then maybe your child has a bad fracture, and all of those feelings maybe that you experienced in the early days of the diagnosis all come back up again. And that's a really normal experience to have, but it's also really difficult, because you're then practically trying to be there for your child whilst also experiencing all those feelings for yourself. So finding ways to do something with that, whether that's through family members, through a partner, but also things like the Brittle Bone Society and online communities is another way of being able to share some of those experiences and say, actually, this is my reaction in the middle of all this is how I'm coping and how I'm feeling. And that the emotional adjustment isn't a one-stop tick box exercise. It's something that takes a lifetime really, and it will sort of vary as we go through. And thinking very basically as well, getting enough sleep, having a decent diet, having a bit of time and space to do things that matter to you are really important. And again, those are often the things that sort of get pushed out of the window as you're sort of in there focusing on your child's needs and what they need next really. And a helpful skill that I often work with parents in trying to give them some support in is mindfulness. And what mindfulness is, it sounds a little bit psycho mumbo jumbo, but all it is about paying attention in a particular sort of way. It's about being in the moment. Okay. So we know now, as you're listening to me, you might be listening to me some of the time, but then you might be thinking, I wish I had another piece of cake, maybe when I was at the break, or I should have really maybe grabbed another drink, or I wonder what we're doing next and what that session is going to be like. And that's our brain. That's what our brains do all the time. Yeah. But what that means is sometimes we have sort of less capacity to be here and to respond to what's going on here and now. And so we're less flexible to it because we're thinking about what's happened before and we're thinking about what yet to come. And actually, if we can help ourselves to pay attention in a different sort of way, we can respond differently to what's going on in front of us. And that can be a really useful tool because a lot of the time, it's when anxiety from the past or concerns and worries about the future come in really and start making choices for us that actually maybe we start making decisions and taking paths that we don't really want to take. And it's how we can become more aware of that in that moment to be able to respond to what's happening for us. Okay. So you can clearly see that there's an impact of other people. I know why. Children don't live in a vacuum. They're influenced by their families, they're influenced by the healthcare system, their community, and wider society as well, in terms of its expectations. And all of those things have a varying amount of influence and impact at different times in their lives. So if we think about that sort of on a very basic early level, taking this time of year, you've got lots of children who are starting school, how that's spoken about and the messages that young people hear will impact on how they feel about that experience. So say you've got a family who are talking about, oh, don't worry, it'll be okay, it won't be too scary, and I'm sure the teacher won't be as mean as you think she'll be, in a couple of weeks you'll all be settled. And even though the message is, it'll be okay, there's lots of quite scary words in there really that can make young people think, oh okay, is this something that I need to be worried about? Is it something that actually isn't going to be what I thought it was going to be? But then you might have another family who say, yeah, starting school is going to be a big adventure, you're going to be learning lots of new things, you're going to meet lots of new friends, it's going to be really exciting. And again, the message is quite different. So how people talk, the language that we use is really, really important. And we know that children are a sponge for it. They are always listening, picking up on the things that we're saying. So whether that's in a clinic environment, whether that's at home as a family, they're listening to what we're saying, they're being influenced by the things that we're talking about. And this is obviously true of a health condition like OI. So the young person's understanding of themselves and of the world around them is influenced by the stories that they hear. And as human beings, we quite like things to make sense and to fit together. So if we sort of form a story about something, we like that story to stick. And what that means is then we're not very open to accepting new information that doesn't really fit with the story, because that doesn't fit with our expectation. It's almost like our stereotype story that we've got. But obviously, that can be really unhelpful because then young people get quite stuck in a certain way of understanding their experience, and so then they aren't as flexible again to respond to what is the reality in front of me? What does this really mean, what's happening now? And how much of what I'm thinking or feeling is about maybe my worries about what's happened before or the things that other people have told me. So if we take, a young person who's got OI, we've got Jake here. And Jake's 11, he's got a younger sister, enjoys doing IT and wants to go to college when he's older. He's, quite a laid-back, chilled-out guy and has lots of different interests that are going on for him. But young people often sort of talk to me about the feeling of this, of disappearing under this OI bubble really, this OI cloud. That actually people's conversations about them and to them become about their OI rather than about Jake, who's 11, and all those other things that make him a unique and special individual. And again, that's what we've got to really sort of guard against and be aware of how do we enable Jake to shine through? How do we enable conversations to be about all of him and not just that one medical aspect of him? Even though that can feel really big and really powerful at times, there are lots of other aspects that make up that person. So we're going to think a bit more now about how this experience can go on as young people develop and how the impact of language can have an effect. So we think about that sort of journey, the journey of that individual, the journey of Jake, and how the decisions and choices that are made now will impact on the journey that people take. So we can think about, Jake, maybe he was playing at school, he jumped off a climbing frame, had a really bad break. That had a really big impact on school for quite a chunk of time because he missed out, wasn't able to do a lot. But actually, he got back in there. He was supported to get back in there. He found things that he enjoyed, that interested him. And he went on and he joined a theatre company. And that was the thing that, ticked his box, the thing that gave him some passion and some enjoyment. Okay. But you might have another young person who maybe they hear things like, the party's going to be too busy, or no, you can't do that, you can't do dancing, or maybe that university, that's just too far away. And the implicit message there is a sort of story of can't, and a story of actually those opportunities aren't available to you. But maybe they are, but just in a bit of a different way. So the things that young people talk about as feeling that would improve their quality of life is not having OI. And the reason they say that is because then they wouldn't have any fractures, but also they wouldn't have time away from things. And the other big area that young people talk about is being taller. Because one of the things they really notice is people make expectations on your size. And as much as you might say, no, that's not me, I'm this age, I'm able to do these things, people make a judgment in that instant on your appearance, and that can be really difficult for young people to cope with. So they get treated in a much younger way. And also physically maybe, their access to things isn't as easy as it is for other people. But even those things, can they be quite different in terms of their impact depending on the language that is used? So if we've got a parent who's talking about having a fracture, and the child's had a fracture and they're out of school, and that parent becomes quite anxious, they're quite risk aware, they don't really want the child to go back into school because they're worried about what will happen. And so that child withdraws and maybe misses quite a significant chunk of school and isn't able to re-engage in the same way. The impact of that fracture isn't just about the fracture itself, but about all the consequences that come with it. Whereas if you have another family who may be a bit more proactive, really want the child to get back into school very quickly and they support that access, the impact of that fracture is much smaller and has a much less impact on what they're able to do. And the young person's experience of that then is very different. So we've looked at the psychological processes that can impact on the individual, and the key concerns are raised about the families, and also that role of language in others in shaping that experience. And what I'm suggesting really is if we can help young people and families to think about what really matters to you, your values and what is important, that can be a really helpful sort of guiding light when things become difficult. So values are like a direction. So it's like heading north. We never actually get to north, we're always heading in that direction. Okay? And the reason that research says that values are helpful is that when things get difficult and we feel like we get a bit stuck, if we know what it is that we're aiming for, that can motivate us and it can help us keep going. So some of the values that young people with OI have identified is about their health, about having friends, about feeling valued and important, about having good opportunities for work, and also about feeling equal and things being equality. So as well as those values that have been identified by young people with OI, we can see values in lots of different areas. And each person here today will have different sets of values. Some of those might come from your family, some might come from your culture or your society, or some might be just very unique to you about your personal interests and what matters. So whether that might be about being a parent, whether it might be about things that you enjoy to do in your personal time. And all of those values make up who we are really. And sometimes they can fit quite nicely together, but sometimes they also can be quite competing factors. So there might be times when actually your child really needs you and is demanding of your time and attention, but you are really wanting to maybe make a commitment to a course or to training, and it's then looking at how those values fit together and which one maybe feels the most important at that time. So if we're going to help children develop these values and aspire to those things and move in that direction, it's thinking about the sorts of experiences that they're going to need to be able to enable them to do that. So as we touched on before, the being in the school environment, being involved in the normal things that other children their age do. So hobbies, activities, birthday parties, having that special family time that is about fun as a family, not about a health condition or about appointments. And also them feeling that they can respond to questions when they're put to them. So feeling like they have some confidence, they have some control about how much they talk about their OI and how much that's a factor in their relationships with other people. And as they move on to be young adults, again, it's about being invested in the school, about having interests, about socialising, and about, as we touched on earlier, that need to take risks. Even though that might raise all of our anxieties as parents and we don't really want them to do it, they need to do that because that's the thing that's going to help them become the person they want to be. It's going to help them figure out what matters to them and what's important so that they can go on then to think about college or training or university or whatever it is that motivates them and interests them. And then keeping it going then into adulthood. If they're able to access those things, they can also then touch on their interests. They'll find a career that really stimulates and matters to them. And relationships, both sort of friendships and intimate, that create that sense of, yes, this is who I am, this is the person I want to be, and I found other people who recognise that in me so that they feel like they've got an important role. So our values really are about that compass direction. They're a way of helping us when maybe we feel like the sea's really stormy, we can't really see where we're going. They give us a direction to move in towards. And at other times the sea will be calmer and we'll have a clearer view of what it is that we're moving towards. But if we've got our values there as that foundation, hopefully that'll be the thing that keeps us going and helps us as a family and young people to do that. So the aim really today is to think about how chronic conditions like OI can have a significant impact on children, on families and on adults. And that impact is in a variety of domains. Yes, it's physical, but it's also social, it's psychological and it's emotional as well. But it can be altered. It doesn't have to be as significant as maybe we might perceive it to be. And the important things we need to think about really is about how we enable our young people to have access to key developmental achievements and to enable them to follow their dreams and their aspirations. And that we have a really important role in how we talk about their OI and about their opportunities and capabilities because that will shape their future trajectory. And that understanding individuals' values and making committed actions is a way of helping us, even when things feel uncertain and unclear, to move in a direction that's important to that young person and to that family. So I hope that by thinking about some of the experiences that I've had working in paediatrics and the families that I've met over the years, that has given you some ideas of things that might be very similar to what you've experienced as families, but also some ideas about practical things that you might be able to do. And the key thing being really that each individual is unique. We're all unique in this room, as are our children, and it's really important that we try and promote sort of situations and opportunities for them to be the person they want to be so that they can reach their potential. Thank you very much.